Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 50, Sandhagen versus Font, also known as UFC Nashville. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network, Mr. Keith Shillan. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. For those of you who are enjoying this preview on our video platform rather than on the podcast platform of your choice, if you see that trademark look of outrage on Keith's face that he normally only gets when he really doesn't get the betting line for a fight that I've just set up for him. Obviously, we haven't even talked about any fights yet. That is a look that Keith gave when I told him I have not watched any of Band of Brothers. So it sounds like I've got an additional pile of homework to throw on top of the wire that I'm currently chewing my way through.
Wait, you haven't finished The Wire yet?
No, I haven't finished The Wire yet.
You have no taste. You have no taste. I'm sorry.
I have no time.
Oh, stop it.
Well, I will have
What
to.
What season are you on?
2.
Oh, this guy's the worst.
I am the worst.
Yeah. Season 3, 4, those are like the best seasons.
I mean, I've heard that from other people than you. That's when it really ramps up and gets rad. So I have something to look forward to. Something everybody has to look forward to is the only 11 fight card that we have scheduled to boot scoot on into Nashville this Saturday. It was 12. The main and co-main event have been shuffled within the last 4 or 5 weeks, and Sean Woodson has had 2 different prospective opponents drop off. So as of right now, when we're recording, which is Sunday of the beginning of fight week, he doesn't have an opponent. We've got nothing to talk about. So we got 11 fights to preview. Keith and I have talked about in MMA what some of the most horrible, hellish, hypothetical situations are. 2004 Fedor sitting in your guard. You're on the ground with Frank Mir and you realize both of his hands are on one of your limbs. Kamaru Usman pushing you into the chest so hard that you're like starting to squeeze through it like one of those Play-Doh like pasta maker things. I would add to that being Sean Woodson and not knowing 8 days out whether you have to weigh 145 pounds on Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you think Sean Woodson in shape at the end of a full camp weighs right now?
175.
I would guess you're probably right.
He's a huge dude. I met him in Boston. He's huge.
He's huge. I mean, yeah, you look at him in the cage and he's got like long, thin arms and long, thin legs. It's almost like a caricature of the John Jones body. But dude, he's got a big chest and shoulders. His head is a fucking like he is huge. He is as big for his weight class as just about anybody else I can think of.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. I assume if they find anything for him at this point, it might be at 155 or even 160 pound catch weight. I don't know. I wonder if Patricio Pitbull's looking for something to do this weekend.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Patricio Pitbull now has the worst "this is what I did with my summer vacation" essay of any high level fighter in MMA history, as he was in Saitama, Japan this past weekend to corner his brother, Patricky Pitbull, at the Bellator versus Ryzen show. And literally while he's there, like 5 or 6 days out, he agrees to take a fight against a relatively unheralded Ryzen featherweight and got his block knocked off.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine. Well, obviously it sucks for him because now he's lost 2 in a row. He had never lost 2 fights in a row in his entire like 45 fight career.
Both out of his weight class.
Both out of his, one below and one. And how much like Scott Coker, I assume, broke something tasteful in his house. He's like, oh, my best fighter just took a meaningless fight and got like leveled in 2 minutes. Like it's pretty much the most Bellator piece of news I've heard all week.
It's so Bellator. I have the biggest card of the year during the UFC card head to head. Your star gets starched by it felt like, and I'll date myself. I know you'll get this reference, like Little Nog in Hokkaido, Rhode Island. I forgot who got starched first by Terry Sokoju.
It was Lil Nog that got it first.
Little Nog first, yeah. It feels like very Little Nog Terry Sokoju where. Who's this guy get brought in to Little Nog to kill, and then he gets knocked out?
Yep, that's. I mean, I'm trying to think of what an equivalent would be in the UFC for what just happened to Bellator there. It would be the equivalent of Islam Makhachev being in Vegas during International Fight Week to like corner some Dagestani who trains at AKA, and he gets offered a fight with some 155 pounder who's won on the Contender Series 4 months ago. He takes the fight and he gets knocked out in the first round.
Yeah, in the PFL.
in the PFL. Like it's just wild. Like I can't believe Bellator let it go on. Honestly,
Bellator's got a Bellator.
Got a Bellator. It's never boring. Like it, something exciting is going to happen when they're flying by the seat of the pants like that. At any rate, this card, as I mentioned earlier, the main and co-main event both changed. The main event of this card was supposed to be Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Obviously, there was a kind of a time-honored narrative there. Umar Nurmagomedov, one of the hottest up-and-comers in that division, versus Sandhagen, a perpetual contender who's been so close and just not quite made it over the hump. And Nurmagomedov had to drop out. In comes Rob Font. They move it up to 140-pound catch weight. But, I mean, Font is more of a guy who's in the same boat as Sandhagen, a guy that's been a contender for a long time and has come up just a little short every time they've really had a shot at the very pinnacle of the division. So it changes the whole story there. Generally speaking, like, not asking you to pick the fight at this point. We'll get to that when we get to it. But how do you like it as a makeshift main event?
I absolutely hate it. Hate it. Why? Because Rob Font was supposed to fight in Boston. I was going to be there in Boston. I would much rather have had Sandhagen get jumped to the Boston card, which, by the way, is a pay-per-view, which, by the way, they've already lost Cejudo Vera. Now you lost Font Song Yadong. Like, why don't you stack that card up? There's only 10 fights right now booked. It's like 3 weeks away or something like that.
That's a great point.
This is a fight night that it would have a good co-main event in Andrade and Suarez.
Yeah.
Like, that could have got bumped to the main event.
It absolutely could have. And it's interesting you mentioned that. And for one, I like the reasoning there. Sandhagen versus Font, if they bumped it down the road, they probably could have done it at 135. You put that first or second on the pay-per-view, and all of a sudden that thing, at least the main card, is looking pretty healthy. The co-main was supposed to be Tatiana Suarez against Verna Jandiroba. Yeah. Jandiroba falls out, I think it's early July, late June, something, and in steps Jessica Andrade.
Yeah.
Now this one is flat out a more interesting fight to me. Like, I like this a lot.
Yeah, and definitely for name value, which is the argument for that just moving up to the main event. Like, I can understand, like, Jandiroba not getting the main event, but Jessica Andrade, former champion, who's main evented a couple of UFCs already. Yeah, I think the UFC, I think they did it backwards.
Oh, speaking of headlining UFCs, I'm going to ask you a trivia question because it's something that Jay Petrie and I went over.
Here we go.
And you know what? If it takes you a sec to think about it, I'll snip out the think time so that it's not boring for our viewers. But this will be Sandhagen's 5th UFC main event.
Okay.
Who has the record for the most UFC main event appearances that's never held an undisputed title?
Most main events without winning an undisputed title. So you have Poirier was the first guy I thought of, but it's probably not because that's the obvious choice, especially because he.
No. I'm sorry. Bump him because he did win the interim. He did win the interim title. That have never held a title. Period.
Any title. Okay. Yeah.
It's a 3-way tie, so if you can name any one of them.
Nate Diaz is not Nate.
Nate Diaz is
Nate
one of them.
Nate Diaz was one of the guys that I was thinking of.
By the way, the record is 10. Nate Diaz has 10. There are 2 others that have 10.
Just pure volume. Donald Cerrone is one I think of, but I don't think he's got that many main events. Trying to think who's been good. No, Derek Lewis hasn't had 10. Alistair Overeem, has he had like 10 main? No, he hasn't had that many main events. This is I don't know. I'll go with I'll throw those. I'll throw. It's gonna be someone pretty obvious. Let me think. Let me think of stars who didn't really transition as great fighters. Dan Henderson, maybe? No,
Dan Henderson is the second of the 3.
Okay,
Dan Henderson and Nate Diaz are 2 of the 3. fighters who've never held a title.
There's somebody else who's headlined a lot that never won a UFC title. I'm assuming they fought for UFC titles but never won it.
You know what?
Gustafsson? No, he hasn't been in that many main events.
Although that was one of my guesses because he headlined like 5 of the UFC's first 6 events in Sweden, but he still doesn't get to 10.
Yeah,
it's not fair to make you like think about it any longer because Lewis is the third.
Oh, it was Derek Lewis. Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure he had that many main events. All right, so
Dan Henderson, Nate Diaz, and Derek Lewis all have 10 UFC main event appearances without holding a title, a belt. I mean, Henderson did win a one-off tournament. It will be tied later this year when Chan Sung Jung, Korean Zombie, headlines against Max Holloway. He'll have 10 as well.
Wow, he had that many. That's impressive. So you can tell Jay that I got all of them. I got all 3 people by naming 25 people.
Yeah. Hey, the shotgun approach like that works. I don't want to recap last night's card, so I won't go any further down that trail. But now that Lewis is guaranteed to probably get at least 2 or 3 more fights in the UFC, at least one of them is going to be headlining either at the Apex or in Houston. He's probably going to own that record all by himself by the time he retires.
Well, unless he wins the title.
I resign myself to the fact that I am not good at picking fights of Houston fighters, so anything could happen. Yeah. That's my way of saying congrats on getting the Lewis and Giles versus Bonfim picks both right when I got them both exactly wrong.
Did I picked Lewis right?
I thought you picked Lewis.
I didn't pick Lewis.
People picked against Lewis. You picked Gaethje, right?
I picked Gaethje, right? Yeah.
Yeah, good man. All right, that's enough. We've done everything we can not to start talking about this card. Shall we dive in?
I think it's a good card.
Oh no, so do I. I don't think it's bad either. I think we're just being leisurely because there's only 11 fights to talk about.
Okay.
First up at UFC Nashville, at least as the card is currently constituted, is a flyweight matchup between Osbourne and the debuting Assu Almabaev. Osbourne, the 31-year-old Jamaican-American residing in Wisconsin, is 12-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 4-3 in the UFC since joining out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his last time out. It was at the Muniz versus Allen fight night back in February, where he picked up a split decision over Charles Johnson. He'll be looking to make it 2 in a row here against the debuting Kazakhstani. Abu Almabaev, 29-year-old, 17-2 overall. He comes in on, I believe, a 12-fight win streak in a bunch of good promotions, honestly. M1, Brave CF. He comes in, I think, having won his last 3 in Brave CF. Odds here actually favor the newcomer. Almabaev is minus 150 right now. Osbourne out there around plus 120. Interesting thing about Osbourne, if you were just anybody, not you, you wouldn't ask me this, but if just any average, person were to ask me, hey, what weight class does Osbourne fight at? I'd be like, oh, Osbourne's flyweight. This is Osbourne's 8th fight in the UFC, and he's only fought at flyweight twice, thanks to a combination of he's blown weight 2 times. He has he's taken short notice fights up a weight class or even up 2 weight classes. I mean, he has 1 fight at featherweight in the UFC, fighting at contracted catch weights. In his 7 UFC fights, he's only actually fought at flyweight twice. This is going to be his 3rd try. I'll talk a little bit about the newcomer. Nice thing about guys who come to the UFC through a promotion like Brave CF is you get access to all their fights. I like what I see when I watch this guy. He's short and compact, even by the standards of flyweight. Like he's a short, burly guy. He is very athletic, light on his feet, quick motions, good natural power on most of what he does. He's an orthodox striker. He bounces in and out. He has a nice jab and feint that he uses primarily to set up his wrestling. He's willing to strike, but it's all a means to an end for him. He is a wrestler. And interesting thing about him is he really favors the single leg. And I think I know why after watching a couple of his fights, because when you shoot a double leg and finish a double leg in MMA, not in wrestling, the almost default is that you end up in the person's guard. Like, unless you're Cain Velasquez and you finish your double by scooping the guy up and like spearing him with your shoulder and knocking the wind out of him and landing in side control, the default is, you know, when you're Matt Hughes or Sean Shirk, you shoot through his hips, you land in his guard. Almabaev doesn't want to be in your guard. I think he shoots the single leg because it allows him to get the person off their feet, and the movement keeps going. He uses it to initiate scrambles because what he really wants to do is take the back. So at least against the people he's been fighting over in the CIS, it's worked like a charm. He, you know, I'd say he finishes with power rather than technique. Like once he gets the single leg, especially if he can get it high enough to kind of transition to a high crotch, he's good at just powering through a sprawl, you know, kind of flinging the guy down. But again, he's not looking to get to half guard or full guard. He's, you know, trying to take the back. He's good at taking the back, sinks his hooks. He has a good rear naked choke series. Majority of his wins are by submission, and primarily they've been things that are either a rear naked choke or have been set up by that position for him. Here, Osbourne is going to be a step up from most of the competition he's been fighting, at least in terms of his offensive acumen. Osbourne, he is big for flyweight. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world that he's ended up fighting at bantamweight and at, you know, catch weights quite a lot. But, you know, he's long, lanky, very quick, very athletic, good power on everything. But I haven't given up on Osbourne as a fighter because even the current version of him clearly is good enough to hang in the 125 or 135 pound divisions in the UFC. But I think I am starting to give up on him turning a corner anytime soon. If you're a longtime viewer of our previews, you've probably heard me say that I don't feel comfortable picking a fighter when their best routes to victory all involve their opponent making a mistake. But there are exceptions to that, and Osbourne is one of them. If a fighter needs Ode Osbourne to make a mistake or come in with a poor game plan, they might have a good chance of pulling it off. Osbourne ideally should be able to use his jab and footwork and length and even his kicks to just kind of stay on the outside and chip away at Almabaev and win a ho-hum decision. But I just don't trust him to be able to do it. I think he's going to let Almabaev get his hands on him. I think he is going to get taken down. He's a pretty good offensive grappler and wrestler, not so much when someone else is putting it on him. So here, I think this, I get why the line is what it is. I think this does favor the newcomer. Give me Assu Almabaev to make a big splash here by tapping out Ode Osbourne in the second round, and I'll just say it's his trademark rear naked choke.
Yeah, I love that you talk about Ode Osbourne and you talk about his fight IQ. Wasn't he used to be a teacher?
And that's where we find out that fight IQ and regular IQ are absolutely not the same thing. You know,
it'd be great if he had like a poor IQ at teaching too. Like he's teaching a class and they're like, teacher, tell me how to spell 4, like the number, and he's spelling it wrong, like FOR, of course. You know, give me the I before E rule, and he's saying it wrong and stuff.
I mean, you can be Rich Franklin and be just literally have a master's degree in education and be a former teacher and still think that the clinch was going to be your sweet spot in the second Anderson Silva fight.
Was it? Yeah. remember? I remember when Rich Franklin? It was season 2 of The Ultimate Fighter, and his suggestion was to like to like it just sounds stupid, like walk on his knees so he can't knee you or something.
That was a really who did he say that to? I forgot.
It was like to the whole team, and then they went up and they asked Randy Couture, and they're like, he's like, well, the good thing about that is if they can't knee in the head. Do you think we should do it, Randy? No. Randy's like, no. I feel so bad if I have that story backwards. It was actually the other way around. It was Randy saying to do it. Rich was saying no, but I'm almost positive it was Rich saying it. Yeah, this is an intriguing fight. Obviously, flyweight, I always like that. I think this card's really loaded. Like other than the Bozer versus
Kamer
Kamer fight.
Yeah.
The rest of the card I like.
Yeah.
Every fight.
And if Bozer versus Kamer is what we have to deal with instead of a unranked heavyweight fight, I'll take it.
Yeah, I agree. Osbourne, he's a southpaw. He's long and lengthy. He fights well from range. He showed improvements in his last fight by really shortening up his strikes and keeping them tighter, because sometimes he gets a little wide and telegraphed, which is funny because you actually land stronger with short shots. Good output. He has like a controlled aggression. I'd say his hands are pretty fast, accurate, explosive, throws a lot of combinations. His check right hook is his best. He's got good power for the division. Interesting fact about the division, I didn't know that he hasn't fought at flyweight that much. He'll toss out some dumb, stupid spinning attacks for no reason. Tyson Nam made him pay for that stupid jumping stuff that he does. I like his teeth. I like his calf kicks, but he plants his legs, kind of leaving him open to really hard counters. He has those really long legs. He also relies solely on head movement. He drops his hands and pulls it straight back. It's why he got blasted by Manel Kape. I like that he's starting to wrestle more. There was something we saw him against Charles Johnson turn into a wrestling match. He's got pretty good ground and pound. He has 4 submissions, but you talk about a guy, he'll drop on an ankle, but he's on top and like lose a round because of it. And then you really have to question his chin, being that he got knocked out by Cobb, he got knocked out by Nam. Johnson hurt him a couple of times in that fight. Almabaev, it's always a good thing when you have someone come in from Brave UFC. Like, they've had a good history coming in the UFC. Always good when you add bodies to flyweight too. I agree. Athletic. He uses a lot of pressure to his striking. He throws hard. He does some spinning attacks, like spinning back kicks and stuff. But a lot of it is, like you said, is all of his striking that forces his opponent in the back foot, because he can wrestle and he wants to wrestle and he's gonna wrestle. I guarantee he shoots pretty early on Ode Osbourne. He's got good top control. I watched one fight. You talking about him, wanting to go past the guard. I saw one fight, and I can't remember who. I think it was I pulled it up right here. I think it was the Imram Megaramov fight, where he was in the opponent's guard, and I don't think he had an answer for it. He was stalled. He didn't do much, but he was winning because he just held his opponent down. But you mentioned he's a submission threat. He's got to take you back. He's got 8 subs. You're much higher on Almabaev striking than I am. I think he's one-dimensional, but that one dimension is good. It's very good. I could easily see him taking and holding Osbourne down, but I'm gonna go with the upset. I'm gonna go with Osbourne. He's bigger. He's the better athlete. He's more well-rounded. He hits harder. I say he gets taken down, but he does enough to create a scramble and get back to his feet. At least I hope he does. I think I'll know pretty early if he can't get up, but I think he wins enough to striking battles. Not a lot of confidence to pick, but I'm going to go Osbourne in a slight upset. I'll say he wins by split decision.
All right. We have a little bit of intrigue right off the bat at UFC on ESPN 50. Next up, it is the men's flyweights again, as Jake Hadley looks to continue his elite prospect redemption story against Cody Durden. Hadley, the 26-year-old Birmingham, England native, is 10-1 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He suffered his only career loss in his UFC debut, got upset by Alan Nascimento. Since then, he has taken it out on everyone else with a vengeance, getting stoppages of Carlos Candelario and Malcolm Gordon inside the distance. Most recent of those, the Gordon fight, was at UFC 286 in March, where he knocked him out in just 61 seconds. So he'll look to make it 3 in a row against Durden. 32-year-old Georgia native is 15-4-1 overall. He is 4-2-1 in the UFC, and he is on a 3-fight win streak. Ever since his quick and brutal loss to super prospect Muhammad Mokaev last March, he has rattled off wins over JP Bays, Carlos Mota, and Charles Johnson. The most recent of those, the Johnson fight, was at UFC on ESPN, Song versus Simone in April. Odds here find the Brit a moderate favorite. He's minus 170 or so on most of your books. Durden out there around plus 140 or plus 145. Keith, Jake Hadley, 26 years old, came into the UFC with the kind of little extra sauce to the hype that any undefeated prospect does when they come from the UK or Ireland. There's just, they have a certain cockiness to them. The fact that they speak English makes it easy to get sound bites out of them. That took a ding right out of the gate. But how high are you still on him as a prospect? And do you think this is an appropriate next test for him?
Yeah, this is step up in competition. I'll say that. Durden's a lot better than Hadley's a guy who came in with a lot of hype. Durden had no hype, but he's been really good lately. So this is a tough test. This is a fun fight, and I think it's too low on the card. I think this, based on both the guys have big personalities, they're exciting. They both could make a run in that division. I think it should be much higher in the card. Hadley, southpaw with great output, really presses his opponent's back with nonstop pace, constantly taking ground, cutting off the cage, trapping his opponent. Very strong boxing. He's got like a power jab, good variety in striking, constantly mixing things up. I love that he focuses on the body so much. It's such a big part. Defensive things, he does little things where he does this really weird pillaring where his right arm comes across his body, which was just something that weird. This can break his opponent's hand when they're throwing, trying to kind of catch it off the elbow and everything. The problem is it also leaves him to body shots, particularly like a body kick or something. He also backs straight up in the center line if you press him, which I don't like that. But he's got a mean kicking game. He really turns over his hips on his kicks, especially when he goes to the body. He can wrestle, good top control. He looks to advance when he's on the ground. Weaker defensive wrestler because of how aggressive he is. He kind of just walks right in to his opponent's entries. But he's very flexible. Hits the ground. He's tossing subs off his back, chaining subs together. You look like what he did to Mitch Raposo. He went for a Gogo plot against Mitch Raposo. That's a while back on the Contender Series, but he does struggle though to get off the bottom because he plays so much time. He can get pinned against the canvas. That's what kind of happened to him against Alan Nascimento. That's something we haven't seen in his last couple fights. So that's a good sign. Now Durden, high output striker. He's constantly moving forward. He throws a lot of power shots, wild power shots. He's got to press the action. He's going to slide in the pocket. He's going to unload big power shots. And then either he's going to get all the way out or he's going to come in and shoot for a takedown. Throws a lot of looping shots. I'd say his power is underrated. He starts JB buys. He dropped Carlston. He hurt Charles Johnson in their fight. So he can hit. He's got a good kicking game, hard leg kicks. He's one of the few guys who checks leg kicks. But he's a relentless wrestler. Like, he'll shoot for takedowns. He'll chain wrestle takedowns together well. Solid top game, good top control. It's been a while, but I always go back to that Chris Gutierrez fight where he was able to take Chris Gutierrez back and hold him for the entire round on his back, which was, that was going to end up being a draw, but that was a tough fight for Durden, who a lot of people didn't expect to have a shot and to almost like submit. Chris Gutierrez was good. On top, good ground and pound. I am worried about a submission defense, though, because he's been subbed out of his 4 losses. He's been subbed 3 times. So, again, I think this is a fantastic matchup. I like both guys. Hadley is a guy that, he jumps off the page with his athleticism and things he can do. But Durden is a guy that every time he comes out, he looks better and better. I think Hadley has is the better fighter with the higher ceiling. However, he plays a little too much off his back, which, the last time he went against a guy that wants to get the fight to the ground, he lost because he spent so much time. I think he should have the advantage on the feet. I think if someone gets submission, it'll be him, even though I think Durden's offensive submission game is pretty good, but Hadley's pretty slick there. But I wonder who's going to be backing up because both guys like to move forward. I think Durden might actually press the action. I expect Durden to get a few takedowns. And if he spends too much time on top, he can steal some rounds. And that's actually where I'm going. I'm going to go with the upset again. I'm going to take back-to-back upset picks. I'm going to say Durden turns this into a wrestling match, and he wins it. And because of that, he gets a decision win.
Oh, I like the pick there. I like the breakdown. What I should have mentioned off the top, and I'm going to mention now because it's kind of relevant to what I was saying when I set up this fight, is this was not the original matchup either. Hadley was supposed to take on Tagir Ulanbekov at this event. Ulanbekov fell off, and it was far enough back that I had forgotten about it, and Durden steps in. It's plenty of time that they're both going to make the contracted weight. But uh, I remember thinking at the time is that either the UFC is cutting bait on Hadley as a prospect because talk about a step up in competition from the guys they've been fighting. Tagir Ulanbekov is a serious cat himself, or they believe in Hadley to the point that they think he's ready for a guy of that level. I didn't do any tape study for that, but off the cuff, I think I would have favored Ulanbekov over Hadley. Here, I see this dynamic the same way you do. It should make for like one hell of an exciting fight. It's two guys who want to control the action, who want to press. I think you're right that Durden's power is underrated. And I think it's part and parcel of a whole thing where I think his general size and physical strength, at least I don't give him enough credit for it. He is a big, strong guy for 125, maybe one of the bigger, stronger guys in the division, to the point that I actually find it a little surprising and impressive that he's able to fight the way he does for 15 minutes with what I can only assume is a substantial weight cut. But I'm with you on this one. I like Hadley here. Certainly, Hadley could catch Durden and exploit him on the ground or in transition. The times that Durden has lost in the UFC, both times he's been kind of blitzed by his opponent's grappling game. And that doesn't mean that he's a bad grappler or even a bad defensive grappler. Like losing to Muhammad Mokaev by anything in 2022 was not a mark of shame. And Jimmy Flick was sort of the flyweight Dustin Hazlett for as long as it lasted. Like he's just was going to do weird and exotic things to opponents in the cage, until people started figuring him out. But I do think of one guy really like it. If Durden is the superior fighter on the ground, I think it's going to be through control, deliberate positional advances, some nice ground and pound. Whereas if I think it turns out that Hadley has the advantage on the ground, he's going to have Durden in a ton of trouble. He'll grab a front headlock and have him like in all kinds of trouble, or he'll take his back and we'll spend half a round with like Durden fighting for his life against getting choked. But I'm with you here. I lean with Durden as a guy that has just a little more experience at the top level, is a little bit bigger and stronger. It may well be that Hadley has greater upside in terms of like, if one of these guys is a top 10 fighter 2 years from now, more likely Hadley. But right now, I think Durden will be a little too much too soon for the Brit. So give me Durden also to win a decision. And I don't know if I'm hoping or hoping not that we get some sort of like horrible soundbite at the end about like sending him back to England. But either way, he's going to have his moment on the mic because I think he's getting his hand raised. We head now to the welterweight division as Jeremiah Wells takes on Carlston Harris. Wells, the 36-year-old Greater Philadelphia native, is 12-2-1 overall. He is a perfect 4-0 in the UFC since joining going on 4 years ago. He's had a couple of lengthy layoffs, but he has fought 3 times in the last 16 months or so. He fought most recently at the Pavlovich versus Blades fight night in April, where he took a split decision over Matthew Semmelsberger. So he will look to keep his UFC record spotless against Harris, who is a bit of a prospect in his own right. 36-year-old from Guyana, 18-5 overall, 3-1 in the UFC. He fought most recently back in March at the Jan versus Dvalishvili fight night, where he took a unanimous decision over Jared Gooden. That allowed him to bounce back from his lone UFC loss so far, which was last February against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Odds here favor the Philly native quite a bit. He is minus 165, Harris plus 140 or so. Keith, it feels weird to call a couple of 36-year-olds prospects, but there's something of that about them.
Sure.
Mostly because they were such relative latecomers to top-level promotions. I mean, Jeremiah Wells was fighting in CFFC in his early 30s. Harris was fighting in a bunch of South American and Caribbean promotions, past his 30th birthday. But there's no time to waste if you want to do stuff in the UFC welterweight division. Like knowing that you need to rack up 6 or 7 wins in a row, even to get a ranked opponent.
Yeah.
This is kind of make or break time for one or the other of these guys. And that feels weird in particular to say about Harris, because the only thing Harris has done wrong is get blown away by Shavkat Rakhmonov. And he's done that to literally everybody he's fought in the UFC so far. Aside from that, Harris has dominant wins over, kind of decentish opposition. Tell me if you see any actual contender upside in either of these guys, considering that the clock is working against them, and tell me who you think gets it done here.
Yeah, I'd say I don't because of the weight class. If this was middleweight, I would probably say the winner I'd feel pretty good about, but welterweight is so loaded. I mean, we talk about the top contenders, Leon Edwards, obviously he's a champion, but Leon Edwards, Colby Covington, Belal Muhammad, like Kamaru Usman. But then we also just, on the recap show, we talk about all those young guys that are added to this division. Jack Della Maddalena's, Michael Morales is, Gabriel Bonfim. There's even more guys that I'm not, Sean Brady and all this. So there's so many guys. And then you still have like those just tough outs, the tough veterans. Your Jeff Neals, Neil Magny, Vicente Luque, RDA. Like, to get through all these guys to contend for a title, it's like the impossible road.
Yeah.
So my answer will be no, but I still think it's a hell of a fight, and I like the winner, and if they were 26, the answer might be yes, but if they were 31, 32, the answer might be yes. But Jeremiah was a guy I'm very familiar with. He kind of came up fighting him and my scene a lot, being a East, somewhat East Coast guy, being from Philly. He's built like Alex Volkanovski, where he's short and stocky for the weight class, but also has long arms. He likes to switch stances. He's very fast, very explosive, can be very aggressive. It can be a fast starter. I mean, we saw it against Worley Alves. We saw it against Court McGee. He just whips his punches with so much force. I go back to when he was in CES and he broke Gary Belletto, who just won the CES title, last night. And he broke Gary Belletto's jaw, put him out for like a year and a half or something because of that.
I mean, I assume that it being Rhode Island, like after that fight, somebody had to go and like change the population sign at like the freeway entrance to Rhode Island.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, Rhode Island.
Yeah. And just so you guys update the girls softball, my girls end up losing the next 2 games. So anyways, screw those big states. But Jeremiah Wells, he closes distance across the cage so quickly, very good, like Kevin Holland-ish, where he just a couple steps and he's there. He loves spinning attacks and flying knees, but he can be intelligent, like all that wildness. He can still be intelligent. We saw him wrestle heavy against Matthew Semmelsberger, against Blood Diamond. He went right to his wrestling. He understands the risk he takes when he goes against certain opponents, and he's willing to play it safe. He mixes striking and takedowns together pretty well. I am slightly worried about his chin, as he was dropped by Semmelsberger 3 times, but that might be a little more about Semmelsberger's power. And like, he did wrestle, as I said, and that ended up winning him the fight. He did also hold his ground at some points and kind of square up a little bit too much for my liking, especially against a hard hitter like Semmelsberger. So Carlton Harris, he's to make it other, he's built like Alex Oliveira. He's got these long arms. He fights kind of hits hard, but he fights kind of long. Nice jab. He can get wild. He throws this weird right hand. I can't even explain how wild it is. He showed his power against Impa Kasanga guy. He tends to overthrow his shots, similar to Alex Oliveira. That's why I think he kind of stands out to me based on their physique and the way they fight. He will mix in his wrestling with his striking well. He wrestles a lot. He knows he needs to get the fight to the ground. He's got good entries. He also likes to, he'll shoot into like an upper body, get some upper body takedowns. He's got strong top control, strong top game. I like that he works for position. He's a little bit of a specialist with his submissions. He loves Darce chokes. And despite fighting like Alex Oliveira, he actually has a pretty good deep gas tank, even at this age. This is a fun fight. Wells is going to have to stuff some takedown attempts from Harris. I think he does. I think he might even reverse some of those entries. Wells is a good wrestler himself. But as far as prediction, it ultimately comes down to, I trust the power of Wells. I think he lands a big shot. I think he actually gets some buzz about him. I think he ends it early, and I say Wells knocks him out in the very first round.
Yeah, I like that breakdown a lot. And yeah, I like the point that this is one of the worst divisions imaginable to try and make a contender run in your mid to late 30s. Because it's possible to fight at a high level in your late 30s at welterweight. We're seeing it just fine. There are guys that are fighting arguably as well as they ever have at, in their, I mean, look no further than Stephen Thompson, where his gears have slipped a little bit, but even at 40, he's a dangerous guy and still drawing,
Kevin Holland.
Yeah. Yeah. He's still, drawing top 15 level opponents.
The fights that Stephen Thompson has lost at 40, he would have lost at 30.
Exactly. Thank you. But if you're already at the top of the hill at welterweight in your late 30s, you can stay there. It's making that climb that's tough. And you make a great point. At middleweight, there'd be no problem. In fact, hell, Wells coming in at 4-0. If this were middleweight, he'd be fighting someone, he'd be fighting like
Jared Cannonier.
Or at the very least, if not Jared Cannonier, he'd be fighting like a Kyle Dawkins type or Jack Hermanson. Like, yeah, he might be taking on like a top 15 type guy already, but instead there's such a line ahead of him, and everyone in line around him is 10 years younger. It's a rough look, but these guys are.
He's 4-0. He's not even on the horizon. Mm-mm. Like, you think about like the the plane radar. He's not even that like green screen yet. He's not even in the radar screen.
No, completely. He's only now are both of these guys, the Rachmanov fight aside, only now are both these guys really even taking a step to face another opponent who's kind of on their same level. Like, for the most part, they've been kind of feasting on less talented, less established, or much older, and kind of shot fighters. So this is a big one for whoever wins, because whatever glimmer of hope there is for a run, the winner here has it. The loser really, really has a long shot. But yeah, Harris, I like your comparison to Alex Oliveira, that kind of thing where his build makes you think he's taller than he is, and he does fight kind of tall. But Wells, his power is a big trump card here. Even though they're the same age, Wells feels like he has less tread off the tires, and that makes sense since he has like barely half as many fights. Wells is at what is still, I think, maybe the hottest camp in the sport, even though the incredible Renzo Gracie Philly streak has been snapped. I mean, they've still got an incredible group of fighters. You just think of the people that he's got in his general weight range to work with. I mean, he's working with Sean Brady every week. So I am inclined to pick Wells. I could certainly see him winning a decision, but considering how both these guys fight, if he wins, it probably is going to be a finish. You said second round KO, didn't you?
I went first.
You went first round. I'm thinking second round KO here for Wells at the end of a fight that is going to be a really, really fun scrap for as long as it lasts. Men's bantamweights are up next as Hani Barcelos comes in on relatively short notice to take on Kyler Phillips. Barcelos, the 36-year-old Brazilian, is 17-4 overall. He is 6-3 in the UFC. He is coming in off of a loss. He last fought at the Strickland versus Imavov fight night back in January, where he was KO'd late in the first round by Umar Nurmagomedov. In fact, he has lost 3 of his last 4. So after being one of the more promising rising contenders in the division, he's been on a skid of late. He's going to try to turn it around here by stepping in for Said Nurmagomedov against Phillips. The 28-year-old Phoenix native is 10-2 overall. He's 4-1 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He competed there, he won, but was not immediately signed. Again, season 1, only one person per episode was signed. So even though he knocked out James Gray in 45 seconds, he didn't get the call. he went back to the regionals and in fact took a loss there. He lost to current UFC coworker Victor Henry, but since joining the UFC a little over 3 years ago, he's gone 4-1. He won his last time out, tapped out Marcelo Rojo late in the middle of the third round at UFC 271. That was all the way back last February. That put him back on track after his lone UFC loss, which was I'll say controversial majority decision against Hadley and Paiva back in July of 2021. I say controversial because it went down as a majority loss, but the majority of observers, Keith and me both included, thought it should have been a draw. So you can make a case that by rights, Phillips should still be undefeated in the UFC. Nonetheless, he has the loss, but he is favored not to add to that total here. He is minus 175, Barcelos plus 150 on the comeback. Keith, it was hard not to be really high on Kyler Phillips just a couple of years ago. He had a dazzling style. He was really young.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, he has kind of an iffy loss that at worst maybe should have been a draw. He's had a lengthy layoff due to injury. Tell me how high you still are on Kyler Phillips, or tell me if on this recap we're going to be sitting down fantasy matchmaking Hani Barcelos against the entire bantamweight top 15.
I knew you couldn't resist.
I can't resist. Like I can't wait for him to retire so I won't have to do it anymore. But I can't stop myself.
Yeah, like this is the big test. Like he beats Barcelos, then I'm back on the bandwagon. It kind of goes back to what you said at 170. Like this division is just as loaded. When between 135 and 170, like those 4 weight classes, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight, it's just murder's row. I mean, and flyweight's actually getting pretty stacked too. So I like his ability, and I'm excited to see him fight. Do I think he's going to fight for a title one day? Maybe not. But he's well-rounded. He's extremely athletic. He's elusive, good footwork, good head movement, has quick hands. Isn't the most technical boxer, but he makes up for it with his kicking game. He has a really good kicking game. I love his calf kicks. I like his athletic. I don't like a lot of guys like flying stuff. I don't think it works, but like it works for him. He has flying knees, spinning attacks. Like I like those athletic attacks he does. He can wrestle. He has both entries, shooting doubles and singles and body locks. Pretty good at winning scrambles. He looks to advance one on top. You mentioned he could be undefeated. He also has a solid win over Song Yadong, which has aged obviously extremely well. Hani Barcelos, he's so inconsistent. It looks great one fight, looks bad another fight. One issue has been that he's been gun shy at times. He wants to fight very technical, kind of win a point battle. He struggled in his last fight to get past the kick of Umar Nurmagomedov, really struggled with that. But then against Trevin Jones, he looked very crisp, good hand speed. He's a counter striker who likes to slip and rip. His slip right hand is his best strike. Has a good kicking game, good leg kicks. Doesn't really check leg kicks, which I don't like. He's a very underrated offensive wrestler. Has some good takedowns. Hard to take down himself. Good top control. Great BJJ, I should say. Really slick on the ground. Nice top control. At his prime, he out-grappled Said Nurmagomedov, which is pretty impressive. He is a submission threat. I'm getting a little worried about his chin. I mean, Umar Nurmagomedov knocked him out with a really short, tight shot last time. So this is, if Barcelos beats Kyler Phillips, then I'm going to be convinced he's good. He's still good. And if Phillips wins, I'm going to be convinced that nope, he's the real deal. So the winner, I'll be pretty high on the winner probably makes the Bulls list during the recap show. This is hard fight to pick because like good Hani Barcelos is a tough test for everyone. Plus Phillips, he's been on the shelf for a while, but he's 28, so he should be now in his prime. He's the way better athlete. He's going to have to move and not stay in the other cage. Don't give Barcelos a chance to shoot in and take him down. But Barcelos struggles with the kicks of Almabaev, and that's Phillips' biggest part of his game. Kicks from distance. He's going to have to try to get by that. I don't think he's going to be able to. I say Phillips wins the decision.
Yeah, I like the point you made about how all the divisions 135 through 170, it's a hell of an accomplishment to win enough fights to climb your way onto the edges of the rankings. And adding to the problem is that while I just said in a previous preview that it's possible to fight at a high level at 170 in your late 30s, it's not quite the case to the same extent at 135. I mean, Barcelos is 36, and not only has he all of a sudden lost 3 of 4 after looking like a future contender back in 2019, but he's losing in the kind of ways that you expect of an aging fighter. Chin, not quite what it was. Gas tank, not quite what it was. Speed, not quite what it was. That's concerning, because at his best, again, when he beat Said Nurmagomedov back in 2019, I mean, he was fast, especially for a guy that even at the time was like 32, had nasty power, also fast on the ground, fast and fluid grappler, and that just seems to be abandoning him by degrees here. If Barcelos beats Phillips, I agree that the first obvious interpretation of that would be that Barcelos has still got it, still has something to offer this division at 36. The other possible interpretation would be that Phillips' history of injuries and layoffs is catching up with him, and at an age where he should be just coming into his final form, he's actually already starting to fall off. That would be a bummer, because not only is Phillips a good fighter with some good wins, but he's been an exciting one to watch. He came with a pretty obviously traditional martial arts influenced style, and it's been interesting to watch him learn to make it work on people who are themselves good strikers, people who want to take him down, people who in some cases are bigger than him. But yeah, assuming he is roughly the same guy he was 16 months ago, and even assuming that Barcelos is the same guy he was in January and hasn't dropped off any further, I think this matchup really does favor Phillips. It favors Phillips early if he can just catch Barcelos in the first round. It favors him late unless Barcelos has put a real beating on him. I expect Phillips to be the fresher guy past the midway point in this fight. So Barcelos to win this fight would kind of have to thread a needle. He'd have to win a mid-paced kickboxing match on the feet with a faster guy with good power, or he'd have to consistently get Phillips down and control him and threaten without getting tired first. I don't think he's capable of either of those things at this point. So I'm with you. Give me Phillips to win this one. Phillips wins a decision. Barcelos being who he is, I'm going to say he's competitive through all 3 rounds, but yeah, it might just be one of those fights where he loses 30-27, even though none of the rounds was a blowout. We head now to the featherweight division for a clash between Billy Quarantillo and Damon Jackson. Quarantillo, the 34-year-old Floridian, is 17-5 overall. He is 5-3 since joining the UFC out of the 3rd season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his first several fights right out of the gate, marking himself as a kind of quiet, unsung, interesting rising prospect. But since then, he has had mixed results, and he comes into this fight having alternated wins and losses in his last 6. He is coming in off a loss. He got knocked out middle of the first round by Edson Barboza at UFC on ESPN Holloway versus Allen back in April. Prior to that, he had made the featherweight debut of Alexander Hernandez, a very miserable experience on his way to a second round KO. So Quarantillo hoping to keep the pattern going at least for one more fight and get back into the win column. He'll be looking to do that against Jackson. The 34-year-old Texan is 22-5-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-3-1 with 1 no contest across multiple stints in the UFC. He's 5-2 since rejoining for the last time back in 2020. He is coming in off a loss. He got knocked out by Dan Ige in the second round at the Strickland versus Imavov fight night back in January. prior to that, he had chained together 4 straight wins, including a frankly inspirational win and a pretty significant upset, pounding out Pat Sabatini last September. That, of course, came in just days after he experienced personal and family tragedy. It was a feel-good moment for everybody except maybe Sabatini, and maybe by now in hindsight, even Sabatini, feels a little bit better about it. But nonetheless, Jackson came crashing back to earth in January, so he is looking to get back in the win column as well. He is not favored to do so. Quarantillo is minus 180 as the favorite. Jackson out there around plus 150 on the comeback. Keith, this is an interesting matchup to me because I'm not dead sure who's going to win, although I'm obviously about to give my pick for it. But if this thing makes it to a third round, it's going to be the hell of a thing to see, because both these guys kind of operate on the same MO in that they hang on to put together impressive or inspirational comeback wins. It's not exactly the same. Quarantillo tends to just maybe fall behind early against bigger, faster fighters and just wears them out with cardio. He's got that unrelenting pace, and he just weaponizes his cardio. Whereas Jackson has a little bit more of the Paul Craig thing, where he sometimes has to take a beating before he can find the narrow windows to apply his underrated wrestling and very opportunistic submission game. But nonetheless, these are both guys who either build from round to round or wait for their opponents to break, and are definitely good late round fighters. Here, both guys are also, I believe that, they're both 34 years old. They both appear to be fighting as well as they ever have. I think even though Quarantillo is the favorite here, I'm leaning Jackson just because Quarantillo, I mean, he's not a one-touch like death punch guy. Generally speaking, when he gets TKOs, it is an accumulation of damage, where he's swarming on a guy who's tired because he's been getting Billy Quarantillo'd for 2.5 rounds. I think that's going to be a tough thing to do on Jackson. Jackson gets caught cleanly in a lot of his fights, and unless you are a serious power merchant, it usually takes more than just that. Quarantillo is more than competent on the ground himself. I don't think Jackson is just going to catch him napping and slap a silly guillotine on him. But this may be just kind of the kind of fight that both these guys rarely have, which is a fairly evenly matched fight against a guy with similar skills and natural physical gifts. I think in a vacuum, Jackson is probably the better offensive wrestler, at least. I don't think either of them is a great defensive wrestler. And for any time they spend on the ground, I think Jackson is probably a little more dangerous there. Give me Jackson to win 2 rounds out of 3 here and pull off the mild to moderate upset. And if this goes all 3 rounds, it'll be fun to see kind of both guys trying to pull off their customary heroics. But give me Jackson to be the one who all he needs to do this time is hang on.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic matchup. They kind of 2 of our guys that we like to cheer for. That we like their style. We love.
I mean, throw Darren Elkins in there. All 3 of these guys are all 145, and the UFC has the BMF belt. We will just have the F word middle name belt.
There you go. Who's that other guy? What's his name? He's a Fortis MMA guy, balding on top.
Oh no, Safe is completely bald. No. I mean, another guy at Fortis who's balding on top. I mean, Damon Jackson is the poster guy for Fortis balding on top. Landwehr isn't over there, is he now? Do you mean Landwehr?
No. It doesn't matter. He might not be a Fortis guy. Now I'm thinking about it. I might be mixing him up with Damon Jackson. There's another guy. I can't think of his name. Another guy that we like. But anyways, it doesn't matter. This is going to be a super fun fight. Like, I can't imagine this being boring. Quarantillo is a high output striker whose whole game is beating guy with pressure. He's fearless. He walks through shots. Perfect example is this fight against Alex Hernandez, where he just beats him with just more he stole his soul. Hernandez going to take him, keep coming at him. He's good at sliding in the pocket, unloading a big combination. He loves his overhand left. He has decent pop, But I do agree with you. It's not like one punch, you know, get the doctor in here thing. It's like beat you up, keep hitting you, you know, death by 1,000 blows kind of thing. He hates being bullied back on his back foot. I mean, the last time we saw that was against Gavin Tucker a couple of years ago. He does do like some flying knees. He puts himself out of position, which could fall right into Jackson's takedowns. He's a decent wrestler, more of like a grappling scrambler than he is a wrestler, but he chains attacks together pretty well. He has the mindset to not give up on takedowns, and that's what makes him dangerous. Like he's just mentally tough to break, but he is a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Gavin took him down 7 times. He was even taken down by Alex Hernandez. He's an aggressive grappler though. Like he's going to go for submissions. He struggles to hold his opponent down because he's chasing submissions and going for things instead of like control and position first. He has 5 subs though. He looks for subs off his back instead of scrambling to his feet, which is concerning. He's taken a lot of damage. You got to be worried about his chin as he was, you know, the amount of damage he's taken, but also getting starched by Edson Barbosa. So that's concerning. Damon Jackson, long and lengthy fighter, very high volume, presses an insane pace. Though he doesn't have the urgency we normally saw when he faced Dan Ige. I was surprised that he kind of let Ige set the pace, which was I thought was the wrong game plan. He does well to keep his distance from long strikes. He's got a good kicking game. Defense isn't his strong suit. He tends to stand up tall, chin high in the air. He got smashed by Dan Ige in his last fight. He tends to throw a lot of naked leg kicks, which leaves him open to counters. He can wrestle. He likes to drop down on the hips, especially when his opponent presses action on him. If that's something that Quarantillo does, like I can see Jackson wrestling. He's got 6 takedowns on Charles Rosa. He ragdolled Dan Argueta. But he abandoned his wrestling against Dan Ige, which I thought would have been a better avenue for success for him. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Mirsad Bektik took him down 7 times, especially because he'll jump the guillotine. He has a good guillotine. He's got underrated ground game. Like he's got some slick submissions, good back takes. He likes to backpack. Good cardio. He beat Mirsad Bektik with a comeback. You know, getting a sub in the 3rd round, and it was like I think he took it on like 3 or 4 days' notice too, which was really impressive. But I was surprised he did gas a little bit against Danny Argueta, but I think that's more like the exception to the rule than the norm. This is a great fight. I expect a lot of action. I do see Jackson having the wrestling advantage, but he also has the defensive flaws. I think we have an epic war. I think the odds are way off. To me, this should be as much of a coin toss as possible. Like Quarantillo almost being a 2-1 favorite to me is really, really surprising. But give me Quarantillo to win just because of, you know, he's a more technical boxer. I'll say he wins a split decision that could go either way that we're debating for years.
All right. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you can see that Keith is nowhere to be seen. In the middle of our segment on the Quarantillo versus Jackson fight, he got called into work. In case you didn't know, he is a police officer in his town in Rhode Island, and he works for the Major Crimes Unit, which means he doesn't get called in for small stuff. So this is the preview for the UFC on ESPN 50 prelims. Those 5 fights we will pick up tomorrow and do the main card. So this particular show should be out on Monday morning first thing, and the main card preview should be up on Tuesday first thing. We appreciate your patience. As always, thanks for listening.